Brought to you by AT&T. Hi and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host Miriam Chouar, and today is Thursday, September 14th, 2023, and my guest is Shannon Browning of AT&T's FirstNet. Hi Shannon, how are you?
I'm doing well. First of all, let me thank you for allowing me to come on your podcast. It's definitely a privilege.
Absolutely. Listen, we're going to nerd out about FirstNet, the first responder network, because you guys are doing incredible things. And we live in a time where, unfortunately, we're starting to see a lot of climate change related disasters. And, you guys are at the ready and have the equipment to, get first responders connected and even civilians, as it were, connected. So I'd like to talk to you about that. But before we do, I just want to mention for the audience, I am very well aware there's an elephant in the room right now. It's called the Apple event. And we've had a lot of Apple news, and we're going to talk about it right after we talk to Shannon. So stay tuned for that. All right, Shannon. So tell us about FirstNet, because I think a lot of people don't understand, like especially since AT&T kind of runs the network. I think that maybe you can give us a quick primer on what is FirstNet, why does it matter, and what problem does it solve?
Perfect. So FirstNet stemmed from 9/11. As we remember 9/11, earlier this week, there was a need for public safety to have their own dedicated broadband network. So FirstNet is public safety's broadband network. It is built with AT&T. It utilizes the dedicated spectrum. Band 14 is what it's called. It is in that 700 megahertz frequency. But in layman's term, it allows public safety to talk on a dedicated bandwidth, dedicated pipe, so that they have connectivity when and where they need to speak while they're serving our communities. They have everything that they need to get that job done.
Right. So this is basically live at all times for first responders to use, like in normal day-to-day emergencies, fire departments responding to a fire, police department responding to a car accident, that kind of stuff, right? It's always there, correct?
100%. FirstNet, while it has its own dedicated core, it is built with AT&T, so it is on 24/7, 365, like a normal phone, anything else like that. It just gives them added benefits, priority, preemption, and that added security of always being able to connect.
Right. So that's the key, right? You have on LTE, at least you have band 14, 700 megahertz that is dedicated to FirstNet, right? So, I said you get priority on the network no matter what band you're using, but, you also have that band, but also now you're using 5G, correct?
Yes.
And so you're using the existing bands that the consumer side, the civilian side uses, right?
So exactly, that was one of the great things when AT&T really made that commitment to support public safety. They allowed FirstNet to utilize that existing network, that macro environment, so that those modern innovations, the 4G going to 5G, we have the same access to that same network that we can use. So band 14, our FirstNet network continues to be modern as public safety goes through their time periods, their modernization, the innovation. We stay in parallel with them. We never want to be behind the eight ball. We want to make sure that they are our partners, and we are making sure that we stay up with the latest technology, because ultimately, these are some of our areas of society that rely on heavily on connectivity and those 5G speeds and technology.
Makes sense. So other than getting priority access to the network, no matter what band you're on, right? Prioritizing the devices on the network that are FirstNet, first responder devices. What other tweaks are done that you're aware of that you can share with us compared to like a normal cellular, like the public cellular network?
So other than the fact that, you have that dedicated spectrum, you do have priority and preemption. And then we do have that dedicated core, right? Those are the three big things that we focus on. Everything else there is generated towards that experience, ensuring that connectivity is there. The reliability, the accessibility, and the retainability of the network are of the utmost importance.
PTT, push to talk, is probably something that is optimized on this network, right? I presume.
Yes. So we do have PTT talk, so push to talk, FirstNet push to talk, those mission critical services that go through FirstNet. So they are embedded in our FirstNet core, that FirstNet push to talk. You get the same benefits that FirstNet has at that push to talk experience. Similar to my experience when I was a police officer, everybody knows the LMR radio that push to talk lapel mic. We've now brought that LTE connectivity, that same form factor that public safety is familiar with, they're comfortable with, to their hands, to their fingertips, so that they don't have to have those learning curves. They can still go out and do the job knowing they have that comfortability, that reliability that they've had for decades past.
So that's really awesome. So does any device that AT&T sells have the FirstNet functionality that can then be enabled in software if a first responder uses the device or is subscriber to the network? How does that work exactly? Or is it dedicated a certain type of device is available to FirstNet responders?
So that's a great question. And it's actually fun. It's one of the things that I like to brag about the most. When we started and we signed the contract in 2017 and we moved over to opt in and everything else like that, we were limited on devices, right? We went from that initial one device to now our FirstNet ecosystem. We have over 660 FirstNet devices. And that was one of the big things. Our users have different disciplines, police, fire, EMS, military. They all have different functions. They need to be able to choose that device, that iPhone, that Android, that push to talk radio that they're familiar with, they're comfortable with. And as such, we have added 660 FirstNet devices that have that band 14 chipset in them that these customers can choose from so that they are comfortable when they're performing their daily duties.
That's exciting. I didn't think it was such a broad range of devices. That's really cool. All right, so now let's talk about emergency situation. And we talked, about the climate crisis. There's a lot of more going on. You have yourself told me you've been running around with your head cut off, and we didn't even know if we were going to be able to do this podcast this week because of the storm that's coming on the Atlantic coast right now. So tell me a little bit more about what happens when you kind of get airdropped to a location where there has been some sort of emergency, a forest fire, a hurricane, a tornado, something that has created a lot of destruction and potentially taken down the existing FirstNet network, the existing cellular network, or maybe because of power, it's not available. What are your options and what would you deploy for what? And this is where we get into the toys part of the discussion, the stuff that I saw when I visited AT&T's office in San Francisco. Very cool.
Definitely. So as you saw last week when we discussed some of this, we have invested heavily in deployable assets, ensuring that in those events, those critical times, that we are able to answer the call in time, where it needs to be, when it needs to be there. So as you know, every situation is different. It can be a small situation. It can be a catastrophic event. As such, as a member of the Response Operations Group, we call it ROG, our team goes in before the event, during the event, and after event with these deployable assets. So you talked about power, whether it's nationwide generators, whether we are bringing portable generators, fixed generators on the cell site. We always have a plan to ensure that we can restore power. But on the transport side of it, that's where our deployables truly get fun. So we start with suitcases, right? So we have something that's brand new this year. It's called a mini compact rapid deployable, a mini CRD. It utilizes low Earth orbit satellite as a backhaul form and allows us to have a SBO, single band outdoor radio that is ruggedized, weatherized, that can stand up to the elements, that is literally in large suitcase, Pelican cases.
Two of them. Yeah, I thought it was really cool. It's just two big suitcases, lay them out, connect them, give power, right? Power's not included.
There are 4 batteries in them.
Okay.
So they can last for several hours before we actually need to have a portable generator, some AC power to them. But the great thing about that is they act as a standalone cell site. So they have the ability to propagate that band 14 LTE signal to first responders in the matter of minutes, right? It was 4 buttons that I showed you that we pushed.
Yeah, that was super cool.
It brings the satellite up, it brings the radio up, and their phones are live and they're able to continue with their mission and they have connectivity.
I just thought that was the coolest thing. Like you're just like click, 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 and the whole thing is live. I was just like, oh my God, like this is the best thing ever. And then you have a slightly bigger one that's kind of like the size of a hot dog cart, I guess, is the best comparison for New Yorker folks. Right?
I like it. Yes, that's our compact rapid deployable. So we started with the compact rapid deployable. It was our first customer owned and maintained unit where we allowed primary FirstNet agencies to be able to purchase these so that in their time of need, they do not have to call FirstNet, the response operations group. They can literally hit those same 4 buttons and bring up a cell site and at their fingertips, and they can have that connectivity. Now, the fun part about this, when we talk about innovation and advancement, in Hurricane Ida, we had one compact rapid deployable. It took me
Right.
10 hours to get it off of a pallet, connect the radios, assemble it, and then deliver it. Fast forward to Hurricane Ian, we had 53 of those. Fast forward
Wow.
this year to the wildfires, to Hurricane Hillary, Hurricane Adalia. We now have those same fleet, but we've also added 6 mini CRDs that we talked about, those mini
The
compact rapid
suitcases, yeah.
deployables. And then those large trucks that you saw are response communication vehicles, which are large deployables on that F-59 chassis that allow for members of the response operations group to not only establish that cell site, to be able to have it up within minutes, higher capacity, higher throughput speeds, but we're also able to live inside that vehicle so that these public safety agencies, our customers, they understand that we are there to support them. We're not taking away from them in that time of need. We don't need hotel rooms. We don't need water. We don't need restrooms. This is a large self-contained unit that is providing them connectivity while it allows us to stay out of their way and let them do what they do best, which is serve the community.
Yeah, let's talk a little more about the truck in a second because I think it's fascinating. It's like the ultimate nerd RV.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you. I
fantastic.
appreciate
Like,
that.
no, like you know, you can relate to that. But I think like for me, what struck me about the hot dog cart is like, compared to the suitcases, that was using a geo antenna for the satellite, geostationary orbit, and then you were going. There was actually a way to raise the actual cellular antenna up, and so it's a little bit more. It's a built-in generator as well, so you don't have to run on battery power. You can, but it's there. So I thought that was really interesting, and it was also interesting to see how you managed to miniaturize that into 2 suitcases now. And then so the truck is really cool because, as you said, you can sleep in it. You have a kitchen, you have a bathroom, you have also all kinds of connectivity options. So in order to get a cell site up and running, right, the actual wireless band 14, 700 megahertz, or even 5G connectivity for the FirstNet responders, I'm not talking about civilian, consumer access, because they're going to come next when all the 3 carriers bring it out their emergency equipment. But for you guys to get started, right, you can connect this all 3 of these devices, the suitcase, the hot dog stand, and the truck, to any kind of backhaul, as it were, basically, right? Whether it be fiber, it be low Earth orbit, geostationary orbit, some sort of Wi-Fi network, wired Ethernet. Like, you have this incredible breadth of options that you can connect to fire up that cell site, right? And that's what I thought was really, really cool. It's kind of like you've got this patch bay of where do we get our internet from and how do we feed it back to our first responders? That to me was super exciting.
Yeah, and that's the brilliance behind some of that technology, right? The WAN interfaces. How do you bring in that internet and that transport to that radio? So as you stated, there may be a time where satellite backhaul is the only option. Everything else is out. But there are times when we can backhaul off of existing LTE networks, existing Wi-Fi as WAN, different things like that. And as a member of the response operation groups, it's my job to make sure that we understand we're working with our RAN engineers, those radio access network engineers, to ensure that we are giving the best speeds, the best throughput, the best backhaul, so that we have that best overall experience. The one thing that we never want to do is not be able to optimize the connectivity to a point where the public safety is struggling to have connectivity. They're struggling to allow cameras to connect. And that's really when we talk about that 5G component of it, right? Cameras obviously take an enormous amount of bandwidth. They can put strain on it. So being able to go from that 4G platform to that 5G platform has really been game changing when we talk about, cameras that may take, 5x5, which seems fairly simple, but you put 12, 13, 14 cameras in there, and then you compress them down into one feed. It can be challenging. And that's only one command center or one agency. Well,
Right.
how often do we have mutual aid? That's what FirstNet was built on, mutual aid. You have agencies coming from all over the nation in large events, wildfires, hurricanes, large sporting events that we all know and cherish within our society. And we need to be able to deliver on that expectation that FirstNet has, which is continuing to have connectivity when and where they need it.
Great. And so the other thing that I thought was interesting is even though your role with these devices is to provide connectivity to FirstNet first responders, you also you also have the ability to create a local Wi-Fi network that can be even used by the locals. You said to me that when you arrived in Hawaii during the wildfires, that's what you did. You created a hotspot for them so that they could at least tell their family they were safe. So I thought that was really interesting, right? And that's another functionality you can provide.
Yeah. So that portion of society, right? When we talk about everything that public safety is doing, there's also a portion of our society that still needs to function, still needs to live. Our leaders talk to society. We do all that. We have the ability to give Wi-Fi, open up Wi-Fi calling access through the CRD, the mini C or small deployables. An example of that was in Hurricane Ian. Immediately when we came down, we landed on the Black Hawk. We got the compact rapid deployable out. The very first thing, a woman came up to me, asked if she could make a phone call. I opened up Wi-Fi for her. She broke down in tears after she was done with her phone call. And it wasn't because she was able to have connectivity. It was because she was able to express that she was safe, that her loved ones knew she was okay. But in addition, her loved ones no longer had to continue to call those PSAPs, those 911 answering stations asking, has anybody seen my mother? Has anyone seen my family? And so it takes that burden off of those local 911 call takers, those dispatchers. The last part, our largest asset, the SAT Colt, we do have the ability to open up 1900 PCS, which you're familiar with. And that is for our commercial AT&T users. So you brought up the Maui wildfires. Every day, while our search and rescue teams were out there and our teams were conducting those missions, FirstNet was there on scene with them. Well, during the evening hours when things slow down, we are able to look at bandwidth, open up that commercial spectrum and allow them to communicate, to catch up on any critical piece of insurance claims that they need. And that's a balancing act, right? Is allowing the normal AT&T subscriber the opportunity to still facilitate, because while we're focused on public safety and FirstNet, there is still an equally importance placed on the normal individual in society. We do not forget them as well. And that is what that balancing act, that challenging is. And that's what FirstNet likes to do when we open up Wi-Fi, when we are allowing that commercial spectrum to be utilized in those off hours when public safety is resting.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Shannon, thanks so much for being on the show. I know we have a lot more to talk about. I want to have you on again sometimes. I want to talk about the drone as well. A tethered drone that's basically a cell phone antenna when the antennas are not available. Really cool. But we can't cover it all today. So thanks so much for being on the show. Really appreciate you being here. And we'll have you on again sometime soon.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. You guys have a great day.
Thanks so much. Stay tuned, folks, for the news of the week. Apple, all the things. So, hey, now that we know everything about AT&T's FirstNet, I've got Rebecca Isaacs here of Forbes. Hi, Rebecca. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today, Miriam?
I'm pretty awesome. What did you think of this FirstNet stuff? It's cool, right?
Oh my gosh, it's absolutely fascinating. And I love that you guys were able to go into detail and have such an insightful discussion. This is such an important topic, especially, with the current climate in our world right now.
100%. So this week was Apple Week, and I've got you on to really talk about that primarily. We've got a few news items at the end to deal with, but iPhones, Apple Watches. So
it's
what's
amazing.
Your take? You wrote an article, I'm going to put it in the show notes, that kind of goes over everything and kind of a good recap. And I'd love to hear, let's start with the thing that you felt was the most exciting to you.
Oh my gosh, that's such an interesting question for starters. So in my recap, basically I was typing furiously for 90 plus minutes, almost 2 hours nonstop, just covering each and every iPhone product as well as the new Apple smartwatches that were just announced. Personally, I think that the iPhone 15 Pro Max is probably the most insightful product that they launched as a part of this. Taking a look at the specs, especially with the 6.7-inch display, to me, that makes the most sense in terms of an investment. You've got what they've likened to, 7 cameras in one on this device. You've got that beautiful display. And while it's at the top of the price range there, it still makes sense to me as an investment, especially because as consumers, we're putting these phones to heavy use. We're not trading them in for, multiple years at a time. And so you want the best investment. Why not pick out the best mobile device here? So in terms of what I found particularly interesting, absolutely the Pro Max device there. What about you, Miriam?
Well, I mean, of course, because I'm a camera, fan. I love my cameras. And so it's always interesting to see what Apple does to kind of catch up with Android in that sense, in a way. Like, my opinion, I think Google still wins in imaging, even though Apple's done a pretty good job consistently over the years. And Samsung brings their own flavor with, the choice of lenses here that we're now seeing on the iPhone to some extent. So I think I'm excited about that. But I actually am slightly more excited that the iPhone 15 base model has gotten a pretty good upgrade this year. Like, I felt like the 14 last year compared to the 13 was kind of like, really, guys? Yeah, they really haven't done much here. And I feel like, the fact that we're getting a lot of the features from last year, the chip, the camera sensor, the island, right? All of these, I think, on the base model at $799, and that the prices haven't changed in this time of inflation. And the colors are cool on top of that. I think for me, that's what's got me excited, because it's so much more accessible. And ultimately, if you're looking at a phone, maybe you're on an iPhone 11 right now, which is my case. I don't buy my iPhones every year. I have an iPhone 11. I only use it for video, and I'm ready to upgrade. And if I were to look out there, I could get $200 for this iPhone 11 from Apple, I checked. And so now for, what is it, $599, I can buy this really nice, pretty much almost brings me to a 14 Pro last year in many ways, right? And I get USB-C. Even though I don't get the fast USB-C, I get USB-C, which for my, Android lifestyle is perfect, because that's the final device that I have in my collection that charges on the same charge as everything else. So at the same time, though, you know me, I'm a nerd, and I'm like, gonna buy the fancy one, right? But I'm just saying, this year, I might actually go ahead and buy the Pro. Like, when the 11 came out, I purposely picked the 11 because I'm like, I just need to do video on the cheap one because that's all I need. But then I kind of regretted it later because like, I could have used some of those Pro features. And now I want to try out this crazy Tetra Prism 5x telephoto, a very different approach to what Android's been doing using periscope lens. It's a folded lens too, but it's not folded the same way as what we see on the periscope Android lenses. So yeah, that's my take. I am also a big fan of the Ultra watch, the Apple Watch Ultra 2 now. Just aesthetically, I like the big screen. I like the chunkiness. I'm not the person who'd ever use any of those features. I'm that same person, as I said in a tweet, that would be buying like a Land Rover Defender or a Ford Bronco and go to the grocery store and never take it off-road. But I'd be that person with an Apple Watch Ultra. See, like, I would never go on a hike. I would never get lost in the forest. I would never go scuba diving or skydiving like they showed in the videos. But I would really enjoy that big, bright screen, the new gesture, all that stuff. Oh my
gosh, yes. Can we just talk about that gesture
yes,
there? Because like I'm in the same boat as you, where I am definitely a city dweller. My idea of going into nature is going into a park for maybe like an hour max, and then coming home into my apartment where there are no bugs and it's air conditioned with a fan.
And you have cats.
And I have cats, yeah. And unfortunately, they are hiding today. So no kitten today. But so when, you're talking about this Apple Watch Ultra and all of these amazing features with like the depth meter and stuff, like that's really cool. And for people who are going to use that, that's absolutely amazing. And having that ability to be like, okay, I just did like a record dive, or I was able to, just automatically jumpstart my run. Like I don't even have to like go into anything. That's really honing in on the convenience for consumers, in my opinion. And I think it's great that Apple is being that mindful, that they're like, okay, we know that consumers are doing this. How can we make this easier for them? And that's just, I guess, in addition to, these smartwatches that came out, I think it applies to all across the board. Like you were talking about how you are going to, if you had to choose one of these mobile devices out of this new launch lineup, you would go with the base model. And it's really nice to see Apple kind of take a look at all of what they put in the iPhone 14 Pro and iPhone 14 Pro Max, and then turn around and be like, okay, how can we take these technologies that we implemented into our like top flagship model and help consumers with this new launch product? How can we maximize the benefits? One of the things that they were talking about specifically was how, this A16 Bionic chipset that they put in there, it's now 20% more efficient. So you get a longer battery life. And it's just those little things like that I appreciate with Apple, because they're clearly being mindful about what their consumers are doing and how they're doing it. And we're seeing that really pay off with this new lineup here.
What are you like an Android user primarily or an iPhone user primarily?
Oh my gosh, I am Android.
You're like me, you have all the phones, right?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at 3 different phones on my desk right now.
That's pretty normal
and
for me
ironically,
as
none
well.
of them are Apple. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I have to get on this bandwagon here. But yeah, I'm definitely an Android user. And so being able to take a look at this chipset and these cameras, it's definitely something I'm looking at, because I don't know about you, Miriam. I am a mobile gamer. Like I will
so that A17 Pro, what it's called now, is going to read. I want to benchmark that thing, not because I care about the gaming that much. It's kind of funny because I worked as a game developer for 20 years and people are like, you must be, I'm like, no, like I don't play games. Like I went into gaming because of the tech. I wanted to work on cool tech and I got my fix of that for years, but I appreciate it. Like I appreciate people like you who are gamers, like kudos. I want you guys to have a great time on your phones. So I'm really excited to benchmark this thing, because Hot Hardware that I write review for, they benchmark everything. So maybe I'll get one, because I don't think Apple's going to send us one, and benchmark the crap out of it and see what happens. But I'm excited mostly because Apple has led the way in terms of ARM chipset performance for a while now. And like, I want to see how this fares and compares to an M1 or an M2, like on a laptop or some mobile device that has maybe the iPad, right? Because I feel like it must be close. They're just calling it A, but is it still an A chip? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's a really great question, because I mean they're talking about bringing, what was it, Assassin's Creed Mirage into this mobile device, and that right there, that's not an easy game to run on just any system. And so when you're talking about benchmarking, that is absolutely something that I will be curious to see as these reviews come out of this device, because as a gamer, like you absolutely need that high quality performance in order to, play these games. And so, yeah, I'm just going to be really curious about that. That's something that I think you and I are both going to be keeping an eye on as the reviews start coming in and as we start getting our hands on this device here.
Yeah. So my big, question now is, what do I do for, like, I've decided I'm going to buy an iPhone this year. It's been 4 years. It's time.
Oh,
and
wow.
I said iPhone 11, right? Like 4 years. So, it's time mostly because of USB-C for me. It's also time because it's been 4 years, and I've lived vicariously through my friends' iPhones. I've borrowed them. I've used them. I know what you get. I'm not going to make them my main device ever. It's not going to happen, but never say never, I guess. But my point is, I'm trying to decide, what do I buy? Like by the time you listen to this podcast, I will have make a decision, because obviously the deadline is tonight, Thursday, of Well, actually, Friday, 5 a.m. So I'm a late night person, so I'll probably stay up till 5 a.m. and do it and then go to sleep. But the point is that I have to make some crazy decisions here, Rebecca, because in Canada, where I also live, and I can also go physically and buy a device or order it and have it delivered to an address, there is a SIM tray on the iPhone.
Really?
Yes. The rest of the world gets the SIM tray for the 14 last year and the 15 this year, right? So my question is, do I buy it in the US and save a bit of money? Do I buy it in Canada and get a SIM tray for like about $100 more, right? Converted. So it's like the SIM tray tax. Now I lose millimeter wave in Canada or if I buy it anywhere else because that's where the SIM tray goes, where the millimeter wave antenna is. But I'm not a Verizon customer, and honestly, I don't care about millimeter wave that much. So I'm more likely to do that. But at the same time, I'm in San Francisco right now until I go to New York later this month for an event, and then I'm going back to Canada. But that's later this month. So I can only get things delivered or pick them up in the US. So here's my strategy. You tell me what you think. I'm going to order an iPhone 15 in pink base model. In the US, right? I'm going to pay $7.99 for it, have it either delivered or pick it up at the store. And I'm going to return that eventually before I leave for New York. So I'm going to try it out and get a feel for it, do some benchmarks on the A16, because we don't even have benchmarks on the A16 right now, the Bionic. And then I'm going to order one in Canada as well. Trading in my 11, which I can get about 200 US, 230 Canadian for, and have that delivered to Canada. So when I get there after my New York trip, I have an iPhone 15 Pro Max in white is my goal on this one. And that one's the keeper because it's got the SIM tray. That's where I'm going right now. What is your strategy? Are you even buying one? Do you care? Are you just going to like live vicariously through other people like I have for 4 years?
Oh my gosh. So yeah, that SIM tray, I feel like that's a deal breaker for me because like just sitting there, I don't know about you, but I am always swapping between devices. Like
constantly.
Oh my gosh. Even last night, I'm sitting there, I'm setting up the new Google Pixel Fold that I just got my hands on for Forbes. And like, I'm just messing around with it and I'm pulling it out, putting it in new devices, like changing things around. Oh my gosh, you have it too. Oh my gosh. I completely feel you. Mine is in a beautiful blue color right now.
You got the blue case. Nice.
I have the blue case. And
I didn't have a choice. It's whatever PR sent me.
Same. And so I was just like, oh, cool, blue. I'll try not to dirty it up here. But, but like, I think in terms of the strategy, I think that makes sense just because like you can test it out, get the general gist of what you like about it, what you don't like about it, and then go and get that SIM tray. Because if it does not come with a SIM tray, to be frank, I don't want it in my life. I've got enough tech stuff floating around my house. I mean, I'm sure you do too, especially with mobile tech, like just looking at my desk, in addition to like the smartphones, I've got like 3 pairs of earbuds and like another smartwatch floating around. Like, I mean, I've just got too much.
It's a nightmare. It's a disaster if I look around me right now.
And being able to move around and just like pop it out in one and stick it in another. Like at this point, they're all set up. And so I can be like, oh, I prefer like the Google Pixel camera because like you, I think Google does their cameras very, very beautifully, very detailed, especially their portrait mode. And that's another reason why I'm excited about the iPhone with this new 48 megapixel lens. But being able to swap between like the extra saturation with the Samsung cameras versus the Google or even the Apple, that's essential, especially in the tech world. And being able to, tuck the Flip 5 as an example in my pocket and then swap out for the Pixel Fold for when I want to take some reading on the train. Like I need a SIM card, in short.
So that's kind of my strategy right now. And of course there's a bit more taxes to pay. And then the price converted from Canadian dollars, it's 1,749 Canadian dollars for the Pro Max base model, but it actually adds up to about $100 more than the US price. So that's pre-tax. Of course, tax vary from state to state in the US and vary from province to province in Canada as well. So I'm probably going to pay about the same amount of tax I would pay in California because, high cost of living. But in the past, when I had a residence in Oregon, I would get everything in Oregon because no tax, no sales tax. So the price you see is the price you get. You go to Apple, you buy a MacBook for $2,000. It's $2,000. You're not paying $200 extra in taxes or whatever it might be. So that was always nice.
As a New Yorker, I would appreciate that tax-free thing because like you, I'm in a high cost of living. And so like when I go out and look at these phone prices, I'm like, okay, how much extra am I going to pay in tax for these? Which is also why I'm like, I'm looking at this iPhone and I'm like, I don't know if I'm actually going to invest in one. My hope is that maybe I'll get my hands on one later and maybe I'll just live vicariously through my friends because I don't know about your friends, but almost every single one of my friends uses iPhone and they love the ecosystem. They love the convenience. They love the detailing of the cameras. And I'm just like over here with my Android phone, to be frank. So it's definitely different.
Well, I'm the same way, so I can relate. But look, I think for me, what stands out on these phones right now, USB-C, of course. It's a bit of a bummer that the cheaper one doesn't have the fastest USB-C. It's USB 2. But look, you don't really care on a phone like that. On the Pro, though, Pro and Pro Max, we get 10 gigabits USB 3, which is a big deal because that means when you're transferring those gigantic ProRes videos from your iPhone, it's going to be much, much faster, right? You're not going to airdrop that stuff. It's too big. And in the past, you would airdrop it because Lightning was so slow with USB 2. But now you have the choice of plugging in USB-C to C directly to your MacBook, and boom, there you go. You get yourself a nice, fast download of your files. Here's the other thing. If you plug an external USB like SSD to the iPhone Pro Max and Pro, the 15, you can now save directly your videos to the external drive. So if you're a filmmaker or something, you don't have to transfer out of the phone. You can just disconnect the SSD, take it to your production environment, plug a brand new clean SSD in, and continue shooting. You know what I'm saying? Because in the Pro world, that's how it works, right? They don't wait, like grab the phone at the end. They have these carts, right? These SSD cartridges on their digital cameras that they plug in and then swap out, right? As they film each scene, right?
Oh my gosh.
The question is, of course, do normal filmmakers use an iPhone? Well, probably not, but it's getting closer and closer that you can do that. And I wouldn't be surprised. I shoot all my product photography with mobile devices. I have for about 5 years. Now, I shoot all my videos from my YouTube channel with an iPhone. And I use a special app. I use Filmic Pro, which is a professional filmmaker app that, lets me adjust things like white balance and exposure so that, when a bright screen appears on the video, like, the rest of it doesn't wash out. Like I can actually set the exposure to stay the same, the white balance to stay the same. I can also even set the focus to be in a specific spot. There's all kinds of things you can do. It's like, I don't know, $19 or $20 app on the App Store. But my point is, you can, if you want, today, even without the new iPhones, get some pretty good video results by tweaking things with this app. And I can imagine that with the 15 Pro and Pro Max, it's going to open up a whole new universe for filmmakers who need a very compact camera to be in a very compact space for some reason. Like they can't use like one of those big red cameras or whatever for proper film. And you're going to go like, we're going to go 4K 60 ProRes or log, because log is now supported, and record on an iPhone 15 Pro Max. This is the world we live in. It's kind of insane.
Oh my gosh. When you put it like that, absolutely. And the other thing I'm thinking about too is I know with the USB-C, we're talking about, faster charge times too, because like, I don't know about you, but like I think it's like a 65 watt charger or something, like when I'm in a pinch, because I don't know about you, but I'm always so busy. I'm running around.
Yeah,
like, I'm in and out all day, and being able to use that USB-C port, especially for like iPhone users, that's going to be a total game changer. I was also reading, where was it? I was also reading somewhere, was it yesterday that like they're telling people like, hold off, wait and see what cable that Apple provides, because you don't want to rush out and buy something only to find out that it's not going to bring that, fast charging speeds to your device too.
The good news on that is actually that any 10 gigabit per second USB 3 certified cable will work. There's a bunch already out there from Amazon, Monoprice, and from Anchor and Belkin, and these guys, they're much cheaper than Apple's. So I wouldn't actually worry too much about that. USB is standardized enough. We know this is USB 3, 10 gigabit. Buy a capable cable if you don't have one already. Don't go nuts and buy a Thunderbolt 4 cable, which is what Apple is selling you, which is way more expensive, because you're not going to be using Thunderbolt on this device. Now, obviously, if you have a bunch of Thunderbolt devices and you want to do double duty, buy the fancier cable. It'll still fall back perfectly fine. But yeah, that's one of the challenges of USB-C/Thunderbolt is that, there are different cables for different wattage of charging and different cables for different data, transfer speeds, and they scale up in cost, right? So it really depends. Like, look at your application. If that cable is going to be constantly connected to a charger and you're only going to charge at 20 watt, which by the way is the limit for these iPhones, which is a little low in my opinion. You don't need anything more than a basic, PD compliant USB 2 Type-C cable, right? That's going to cost you $9 from Amazon Basics, But if you're going to be using that ProRes on an iPhone 15 Pro and transferring back to a Mac, you'll probably want to invest I think $19 that Anchor, whoever it is, wants for 1 meter, 3-foot cable. Really reasonable. And then you have something that you can use for other things, and it'll tell you on the cable what it is. Usually there's a little something there. But, the other thing that stood out for me, we talked about USB-C. We talked about some of the updated specs the 15 regular model received. We talked about the cameras. I want to talk about that Tetra Prism camera a little more in a second, the 5x telephoto. But I feel like we should talk about the action button a little bit, right? Because that's right. And the titanium finish, because that's interesting to me as well. So what's your thought on the action button replacing the switch?
Okay, so
mute.
My understanding with the Samsung lineup, I'm just going to do it comparatively in my analysis here. My understanding with the Samsung is that with their quote unquote action button for Bixby, you can only do a handful of things right now. You have to go through third-party apps. And so when Apple introduces this completely customizable action button, I was sitting over here absolutely rejoicing, because I'm just oh, cool. I can program it to pull up my camera, or I can program it to pull up Messenger so I can, shoot a quick message to my mother in the morning, because that's when typically we communicate. And so being able to press that button and program it to do some of these things, to me, is the coolest thing since sliced bread, for lack of a better phrase. I just love that they're giving that customization and that personal flair into the hands of the users. Personally, I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I love it. I've got some niggles around it, because there are some Android phones that have dedicated action buttons, not just the old Bixby button that's now gone, but I'm talking about the Sony Xperia series has a dedicated camera button, and it can be reprogrammed. Now, the nice thing is that this action button on the iPhone can be used as a camera shutter, a camera trigger when you're in the camera app. That's nice, because it's nice to sometimes not want to tap the screen. You want to be able to go click like that, right, on the edge of the phone. So that's a nice thing. The fact that it's programmable is really nice. Two things that I think they should have done. It should be orange, just like on the watch. That would be really cool, right? It should, I know it's titanium, so they can't anodize it orange, but they should have made that button out of aluminum and anodized it orange. That would have been kind of matching the Apple Watch Ultra, right? The other thing is, and that way you can notice, you can see it. If you want to make it an SOS button to call an emergency, you can kind of do it by feel, but you could also do it by sight, because it would kind of stand out a little bit. The other thing I think they missed out on the opportunity is that the only thing you can do is reprogram the long press. There's no single press or double press or whatever. A lot of these Android phones can be configured to do multiple presses. I have this Duraforce phone here from Kyocera for Verizon, which is a rugged phone, right? It's like designed for like first responders and things. It's like crazy, but it has like 5 buttons all the way around. They're all programmable, and you can set them to be like long press, single press, double press. You have all these options. Now, I know Apple wants to minimize the options, but I think at least I think single press doesn't make sense because that can accidentally happen in your pocket. But I think that the long press, which they have right now, but add a double tap does something else. So like imagine you could still want the mute button by long pressing, which is the default, and then double tap would bring the camera up or the flashlight. So you'd have 2 choices, or Siri, right? So I think they could have gone a little further with it. But I understand Apple wants to keep things simple, and it's already a big change for iPhone users, right? To have like, oh my God, our slider for mute is gone. Like, trust me, like on OnePlus phones, I love the slider because it lets you set, not just mute and unmute, but also vibrate. It's a 3-position switch. I love it. I want to continue seeing that on OnePlus phones. But at the same time, that's kind of my feedback to them, if anything. But yeah, I welcome it. Overall, I'm very happy with it, as you said.
Yeah, and I guess just kind of bouncing off of your thoughts there, that double tap, like coming from like, an Android user, I don't know about you, but I use the double tap to access my cameras.
For the power? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for the camera all the time. All the time.
Yeah.
And it can make the difference between like capturing that silly cat photo where he's dangling off of his cat bed, or like completely missing it entirely. So I do agree with you there. That would have been really awesome for them to include. There's always next year, though. That's always the good news.
I kind of feel like every phone should have double tap on the power lock key for camera. And some Android phones don't, which really annoys me. Like, that's a Google thing, and I think you can set Samsung to do it as well. But like some of the Chinese phones don't have it. It's a double tap on the volume up or a double tap on the volume down for the camera, which is really, really annoying when you're used to it, right? But I think, look, for me, like the titanium is really interesting because it's a strange, actually, choice of material. Like, don't get me wrong, like all the things they said about it is true. But you have to remember, like, there is baggage here, right? Apple made a laptop out of titanium, the PowerBook Titanium G4 back in the day. It wasn't called, Apple didn't call it PowerBook Titanium, but that became the name among the Apple intelligentsia. And it was very lightweight and very strong and very awesome. It was the first laptop with a 16:9 aspect ratio display and a first laptop with a 15-inch display. It was a powerhouse back then. It was the video creators editing laptop of choice. We're talking 2000, 2001, right? To give you context. The problem they had then, and I think is going to be a problem now, is the finish on that. So back then they painted the titanium because bare titanium is a fingerprint magnet like you wouldn't believe. Like any device that uses titanium or stainless steel is going to be a fingerprint magnet, and it's because these materials are non-porous. They don't absorb oils. They don't absorb, anything. So compared to like iron or steel, you're not going to get the same kind of like properties of repelling fingerprints. So, but it's also great because you can use them for surgery. You can use them as, implants, as jewelry for piercing because they're inert. They're not going to give you any allergic reaction because they don't absorb anything. So great choice, light, strong, but they had to paint it back in the day on those PowerBooks, and the paint would chip off eventually, making the thing look really, really worn. Now, this is not the case here, so don't panic, but they did PVD coat it. PVD coating, it's something vapor deposition, and it's basically a process used in the watch industry to coat the finishes on watches. It's very durable, but it can be damaged, and when it does, you will see it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when somebody drops an iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max onto concrete, where definitely some of that PVD coating is going to get chipped off, and see what happens cosmetically at that point, beyond the obvious fact that there's going to be a scar from hitting the concrete. So I applaud their choice, but they have a bit of a history here that I want to see how this pans out. Like, I support it for the strengths. I support it for the weight reduction. That's going to be a huge deal. Because the iPhones are heavy, the Pros right now. And having them a little lighter, not too much, because you still want that heft, right? I think is going to be a nice thing. So what's your take on titanium?
So, yeah, I thought that was a really odd choice because, like you said, titanium, like, you're going to see the fingerprints. And again, I don't know about you, Miriam, but I am very, very clean when it comes to my products. Like, I remember when I first pulled out my Kindle Paperwhite when I was reviewing that back in, I think it was 2021. The first thing I noticed was the fingerprints were very, very prevalent on the device. And I'm like, oh God, this is gross. Why is it like this? And so for Apple to sit there and be like, okay, we're going to use this lighter, sturdier material at the cost of the fingerprints, I'm over there just almost bristling because I'm like, oh my God, I can see how many times I've touched my phone. And like, we all know that phones to begin with are considered one of the, like, the germiest pieces of tech that we have, just because, we're touching it all the time. Like, we're touching the subway handrails and then we're like grabbing our phones as an example. So just sitting there, I'm just like, oh God, I don't know how I feel about this quite yet. And in talking with some of my comrades who were at Cupertino this last week, unfortunately, I did not attend. I wasn't able to make it. But talking with them, like, one of the first things they were saying is you could see every single fingerprint on those phones. And so I'm like, oh God, this is gross. So I get why they did it in terms of, that sturdiness and that stability and making it lighter, because you're right. These phones are heavy. And again, I don't know about you, but I don't want to haul around a heavy device. Like, I'm actually actively trying to, like, minimize.
The Pixel Fold is just too much, in my opinion.
It's like way too heavy. I'm carrying it around on the train today when I was heading to a PR event, and I'm just like, I feel like I'm carrying a brick in my hand.
Yeah, basically.
And especially with like the Flip 5, like, just taking a look at its like form factor and stuff, like, it's so much lighter. And so I know they just shaved off a little bit for the iPhone 15 Pro Max with this titanium design. I'll be curious to see how much it feels once I have it in hand. Because I think that's going to be a really big deciding factor for people when they're looking, do I go with the Pro or do I go with the Pro Max? I think it's going to come down to that weight and that form factor. But that's just my 2 cents.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. I think it's interesting. I'd want to note, though, that the stainless steel in the previous generation iPhone 14 Pro series was just as fingerprint happy. Like, it's still bad. Like, stainless steel is just as bad, right? So I think for the iPhone users out there, I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. But for those of us who are maybe used to some Android phones that have aluminum frames that don't fingerprint, Mark, it's going to be definitely a difference. If you come from an iPhone 14 or 13, like non-Pro that has an aluminum frame, you're going to notice it. This brings up another thing on Tom's materials and finish. I am very disappointed with the color choices. And of course, Apple was clear that, like, it's really hard to do titanium. You can't anodize titanium. I'm like, so what? You have an entire panel of glass in the back. What if you'd made the frame titanium, just pure titanium color, and then given us a yellow back, a purple back, a red back, product red? Like, why not separate the colors? Why not contrast? Kind of, we've seen that on Android phones where the back is like a pleather orange, right? And then the frame is silver aluminum anodized. Like, that doesn't look bad. Like, why did you not do that? Like, I'm not saying we need the loudest colors, but like, those colors are so muted and boring that I want to go with white simply because I'm like, yeah, I like white phones. And well, that's the only thing that appeals to me.
Well, and it's such, once again, it's such an odd choice for them because they literally, what was it, last year said that our phones are sturdy enough that you don't need a case. And so they're banking on this guarantee that, if you drop it, it's not going to break. You don't need a case. So why would you not add color to it? Like, I absolutely love rainbow vomit is what I like to call it. The more color, the merrier. I mean, you can even see it in like my interior design here.
Yeah,
like, I've got reds, I've got
blues.
Like, I just absolutely love colors. And I'm looking at these colors that Apple gave us and I'm like, this isn't going to sell me on anything. Like, what is this? And the base model, you come with like pinks and blues and greens and all
they're
these
pastels, which is, another whole story, but they're colorful. And I think those are good colors, Yeah.
Yeah. And like, just looking at in comparison, I'm like, this is not selling me picking up this device because I'm going to have to buy a rainbow case for this. Like, and that's just going to be another expense on top of this, like $1,200. Now that being said, if I'm going to go for anything, it's going to be the Pro or the Pro Max, like I said, but it's just so drab.
That's why I'm going for white, because look, if I get a D brand skin, they're not a sponsor, but we love them. D brand, I can put like a, cover the glass with like an orange pleather, and then I can have the camera pod still be white. That'll be a really good contrast.
Yeah.
Titanium frame, orange pleather back, and white camera island. So I'm gonna, there's third parties here, but like I'm looking at the other colors. There's a silver ish, and then there is like the blue, but the blue and the black, right? The black as well, yeah. The blue and the black are like, I'm like, what do you do to spruce them up? They look like Darth Vader's phones almost,
Yeah,
and maybe that's the thing.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not interested in joining the Sith today. That's the thing. I like the good side of the Force. God, I sound like the worst Star Wars fan ever. But no, I agree with you completely. Like, I wish they would have found a way to incorporate colors. Like, in speaking with like some of the Samsung's executives at Samsung Unpacked, like they're doing extensive research on colors. They're making sure that it fits what consumers are wanting. And I feel like Apple just was like, okay, here's some colors. Like, you're going to like them because they're iPhone. Like, there was no, I feel like there wasn't any market research on that potentially. And that just makes me really sad because, like you, I want color.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I don't want to dwell on this. It's just disappointing. I really hope they surprise us with a product red, which is, as I said, just keep the frame silver or titanium color. It's fine. Look, the Apple Watch Ultra is titanium and it looks really great. Why not that? Like, I don't know. I just feel it's a bit weird. I do welcome the thinner bezels around the display because of the stronger materials, etc. Like, there's definitely some redeeming things here. And before we move on, I want to talk about this 5X telephoto because look, it's only on the Pro Max. The regular Pro has the last year's 3X, which is a fine telephoto, no doubt. But the 5X, they call it, what did they call it? Tetraprism? Yeah. The tetraprism design is very interesting because they didn't do what we see on Android phones. Like, a lot of Android phones, especially flagships, in the last 5 years have had some sort of folded telephoto lens that's either 4X. The lowest I've seen is 3.5. 3.5, 4, 5, or 10X is typically what we've seen. The best known for North American customers, if you're listening from the US and Canada, is basically the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra and its predecessors with the 10X folded lens periscope telephoto, right? So we have that. And we've seen those before, like Pixel is another example. Pixel 6 Pro, Pixel 7 Pro, Pixel Fold, they all have a folded telephoto lens. And you can tell generally, if you look at a phone, because instead of a round opening, it's a kind of more of a rectangular rounded corner opening because of the way the optics are working. So that's, if you ever look at a phone and pick it up and see kind of more a rectangular lens in the back, that's probably what they call a periscope folded lens. Now, the iPhone 15 Pro Max has a 5X telephoto that does not have that design. It's still folded because they're using multiple prisms, hence the tetra, 4 prisms. But it will look round on the output because it's in parallel with the sensor. So the output, where the light shines through, the lens opening is parallel to the sensor. Whereas on a folded periscope lens, it's perpendicular. The light goes in and hits a mirror and then hits a bunch of lenses and the sensor. And these lenses sometimes are prisms as well, because you don't have infinite amounts of space inside a phone. But the way Apple's doing this is very clever. I bet you they patented the crap out of that because I've never seen anything like it. And it's clever because it makes a thin relatively speaking, camera module that doesn't require to have that L shape of the periscope. So there you go. We nerded out. We're done for the nerding out for the show.
But it's so cool that they did that though, because I mean, you're talking about smashing down a 120 millimeter camera into this small device, and I'm sure you've seen them, but those lenses are absolutely ginormous. I mean, it's like carrying around a water bottle half the time, I swear.
Yep.
And so being able to like slip it down into that, I mean, that's just an amazing achievement. And I mean, I'll be curious to see how it works in like real settings, because I mean, as you're aware, we've only seen what Apple has shot out of this device and provided us during its Wonderlust announcement. But I'll be really curious to see how it performs in the real world and how like we ourselves test it and what our thoughts are as we get our hands on this in particular.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be really good. I think that we've seen an evolution in the image quality of the iPhones starting with the 12 to be a little more. I feel like we've lost something. And I think it's because Apple's kind of doing what Android phones are doing, which is prioritizing what does it look like on the screen. Whereas until then, they were really like photographers. They were like, we want to see what happens when you take that out of the phone, put it in Lightroom or whatever, and look at it on a big screen. And so they've changed the color science a bit. They've changed the way they handle detail a little bit. And I feel like that since iPhone 12, it hasn't been for the better. It's a little worse in my opinion, but it still looks fantastic and it's still just perfectly fine. But it's not, I feel, as good as what Google's doing or Samsung's doing. So I'd be interested to see, because it's not just this camera. The entire imaging pipeline is being changed, their photonic engine, whatever they call it. And of course, they have a bigger 48 megapixel on the main camera now on these Pro devices. And as you said, they're kind of cheating by giving us 1x, 1.2x, 1.5x, 2x on the main sensor. Now, 2x is quote unquote lossless because it's cropping to the center of the sensor like it did last year on the 14 Pro, which, by the way, the 15 base has now inherited this feature. But I think the 1.2 and 1.5 shouldn't be counted as lenses because you're not going to get the same quality out of them because they are interpolating. You don't have like some kind of perfect crop here. So I'm not quite convinced on that. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll find out. I think it's going to be really good.
It's going to be really good, but when they sat there and announced that it's basically holding 7 cameras in one, I am very skeptical. I've always been a skeptical person, so that is just partially my are they being for real right now? But I do think that there will probably be some very solid merit to that based off of what we saw. I do think that the pictures do speak for themselves. And I think they were absolutely stunning, just being able to pull all that detail and color shading. And granted, I know whoever is shooting from these devices, they know exactly what they're doing. They can go in with the settings and play with that to get the best picture. Again, I think it's just going to come down to that real world use. And honestly, it's going to come down to how it looks when I photograph my cats. That's what this is going to come down to.
It's always the test, right? Yeah, 100%. I'm excited, but I'm a little cautious. The big problem with, and we see this on the Pixels as well, is when you go from 2x crop to 5x, there's a kind of zoom void there. Like where if you're at 3x or at 3.5 or at 4x, your quality is going to suffer. And I want to see how they handle that, because the way Google does it is by using super res zoom. Right? They're using the motion of your hand and the OIS to capture, when they capture the multiple frames, to reconstruct them such that they create intermediate pixels and you get better resolution. It's their patent that they really nailed this. It's something that makes even like a non-telephoto pixel like the 7A shoot at 5x with results that are like, wow, right? Like compared to a 5x on any other Android phone. So I'm very curious to see how they handle that gap, because on the regular Pro, it goes from 2x to 3x. 3x is the telephoto. So you don't have that compromise. So that's the trick. There's the kind of uncanny valley there of quality, and I want to see how they handle it. I had Steve Litchfield on, UK tech journalist, last week. He's a camera nerd like me, and mobile camera nerd, and we nerded out about what that means. And so if you want to listen in more depth about this void, this zoom issue, check out last week's podcast. But overall, I think these are solid products, and I'm very happy with what I'm seeing. I'm not like surprised that we're not, like, I didn't expect something magical and crazy. Like, phones have become very evolutionary, but I feel like compared to last year's announcements, I really feel like we're getting a bigger gap between 14 and 15 overall than we got between 13 and 14, with all these things, whether it's the Pros or the regular phones. And that makes me happy. 8 gigs of RAM finally, supposedly on the Pro and Pro Max. Nobody cares. I don't think you should care. But the point is, it's interesting that we all know on Android land that 8 gigs is the minimum, right? Like, we cannot do less than 8 gigs to have a good experience. So it's interesting that Apple is now pushing it that high because they are more efficient. They probably don't need 8 gigs all the time, but they're actually delivering 8 gigs now on the Pro and Pro Max, because they're like, I bet you that new chip can do some magical things that require a lot more oomph. And so, yeah, it's good to see them catch up.
No, agreed. And especially with that new chipset, they're talking about it being industry leading and being, what was it, like the first 3 nanometer chipset?
It is the first 3 nanometer that's, physically available to customers on a product, because MediaTek beat them with a 3 nanometer chip last week.
Oh my gosh, I did. Okay, that's a little embarrassing. I did not know
Apple.
that.
It's the other thing is, they announced ray tracing, right?
Yes.
Well, MediaTek and Qualcomm had ray tracing in their chips for a year now. Like, there's nothing new, guys. Like, you're just playing catch up here. We actually expected it to be on the A16 Bionic last year, and it didn't show up. Like, we were like, everybody last year, I remember during the iPhone event, was scratching their heads. Where's your ray tracing? Everybody just talked about ray tracing all year long with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 and the what was it at the time? I think the Dimensity 9000,
Yeah, and as a gamer, I'm just happy that they put it on there, because it really does enhance the picture and that display quality. My understanding is that there wasn't really much that changed in terms of the display quality besides, this ray tracing, but it's, to me, a massive improvement. I know when I get back into my mobile gaming experience on this device, I'm going to be like, oh, thank God, finally some real shading here.
Yeah, right.
So it's just those little things. It's better late than never, but I am glad that they finally did incorporate it.
Me too. Absolutely. One last thing I want to bring up on the phones before we move to the news is really that, 60 hertz on that iPhone 15 base.
What?
Ouch,
Why?
right? Yeah.
Why?
It doesn't have ProMotion, which is the 120 hertz refresh rate of the Pro models. I really thought they would at least give us something like 90 or something. I think why is because the average person doesn't care. You and I know what it looks like, and we notice and we care. But think about it. If you're an iPhone user and you come from a non-Pro device, you're not going to notice. And so you can save battery, which I think is the thing, right? Apple's trying to optimize the experience. I'm not trying to make excuses for them. For me, this is a really annoying thing. And I don't think that they can continue like that. ProMotion has to come to the iPhone 16 base model next year. But, I can see maybe why, but not acceptable. Apple.
No, I completely agree. It's unacceptable, and I feel like they could have done better, and I'm probably going to get angry messages after this for saying that. Nah. I don't know. I just think that they could have at least incorporated 90 hertz at the minimum, or when I'm looking at my other devices that are strewn about my desk here, those have 120 hertz.
Yeah, that's, you can buy a budget phone with 120 hertz on Android land now, right? It's it's par for the course, right? So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
We briefly talked about the watches. I mean, there's not much to say here. The big news is the S9 chip, which is in both the Series 9 and the Ultra 2. And that gesture, we talked about that, which I think is the most exciting thing, possibly one of the most exciting things in the entire keynote. I'm really looking forward to trying that out. But I feel like we should just mention there is also a Series 9. It's a new watch and it's more battery efficiency. The Ultra 2 also gets a peak brightness of 3,000 nits, which is absolutely insane. So if you're getting an Ultra, you're getting a few little more things than last year. Would I upgrade last year's Ultra watch? Absolutely not. But if you have been waiting to buy an Ultra, this is it. This is it. Buy this one and wait 2 or 3 years to buy the next one, right?
No, completely agree. Like, I do like the fact that they increased the brightness, and I believe they did that on the iPhones too. What is it, like 2,000 nits now?
Yeah, it's a little more, yeah.
Yeah, it's just a little more. But having that 3,000, like, when you're walking around and trying to like check notifications on your arm, that's going to be a really nice touch in my opinion. So yeah, I don't think it's worth upgrading either, but if you're in the market for a new watch, or if you're, prepping for a triathlon and all of a sudden need to go out and buy one of these, not that I ever would do anything like that, but if you do, then it's time to maybe consider the Ultra Watch too.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's switch to some news now. I'm going to talk about some folding phones. So I don't know if you've been following this because I don't know how much you follow Chinese market stuff, but I was at IFA in Berlin 2 weeks ago, right? And Honor launched the global version, because they'd already launched this phone before, the global version of their Magic V2 folding book style phone. Think competitor to the Z Fold 5 and the Pixel Fold. That phone is the lightest and thinnest. It's 9.9 millimeters shut and 4.8 or 7 millimeters open, and it is lighter than an iPhone 14 Pro, which is remarkable. But they also showed a concept I'm holding on to my Realme buds that I just got. They're really great, by the way, for those of you watching on the Patreon feed. These are really nice. They're the Buds 5 Pro, I believe. Anyway, it's a fidget spinner for me. Like, I'm just fidgeting. Anyway, what I'm saying is that they also showed a concept at IFA for what they called the Honor Vapors. And we all rolled our eyes because it's not that I don't have an issue with the idea of what they're doing. The way they presented was terrible. We go to the podcast 2 weeks ago to hear my rant with my guests about it. But this looks like a carbon copy of the Mate X series, XS series from Huawei. First of all, like, come on, Honor, like, you're no longer Huawei, right? But secondly, they showed us this as a concept only for this week. Surprise! Oh, it's selling in China now. So now it's a real product. Like, we could figure that out. It was so obvious. What are you talking about? Like, why didn't you come out at IFA and say, oh, it's coming to China next week or 2 weeks from now? Did you really have to just suddenly, like, send us a PR email saying, ta-da? Like, oh, they are so weird. They just don't know how to communicate their PR. It's so bad.
No. And that's really interesting that they decided to do that in that manner. I feel like that's been, like, why, how do I put this? If you're gonna announce a phone, you need to be ready to announce when it's gonna sell. And I do like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen the design. I'm sure, we're looking at the same thing here.
Oh,
it is a very beautiful design, but
it's really cool.
Basically just going out and being like, okay, like, surprise, that's not a good way to market this device. And I actually think aesthetically, I find it more pleasing. I'm going to have a super unpopular opinion here, but I think it's actually aesthetically more pleasing than like the Samsung Z Fold 5.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everything is. In my opinion, like, I'm a big fan of the Passport form factor of the Pixel Fold, right? And I feel like I really don't like the form factor of the Galaxy Z Fold in all its incarnations. But yeah, this is interesting because it's an outside folding display. So I don't know how durable that's going to be because you get that edge all the time, potentially hitting things and rubbing against things. I don't know. I think this is a fashion, statement. that's going to do well in bling China market, right? Like, no offense, but like they love the bling, and this is bling, and there you go, and you're going to pay for it. But I just think it's weird to me that they didn't announce at IFA, hey, this is a concept, but it's really just almost, we're going to be launching it soon or something. That would have made more sense. And then there's a whole weird Huawei thing here where it's really just a carbon copy of the Mate. I don't know. The whole thing is just feels really weird to me.
So I actually do have a question here. Were you at IFA? Were you able to get hands-on testing with this?
I played with it. Yeah. I mean, it's exactly as I said. As soon as I touched it, as soon as I saw it in the PR materials they sent us in advance under embargo, I was like, this is a Huawei Mate XS2. And then sure enough, I played with it. I'm like, yep, it's rebranded. It's exactly the same phone with a different chipset, and of course GMS support. I was like, wow, like. You're not worried about like people putting it together. Like, you're supposed to be separate companies, yet this looks suspiciously like the same product, right? Like, I don't care. I have no stakes here. I love Honor, and I actually still love what Huawei's doing. But like, you're playing with fire here.
Like, it's okay to like branch out and maybe like try new things. And you're right. I do feel like this is just basically another like carbon copy of something. Now, that being said, I do want to like go back and mention something here, because you mentioned that, this is a very blingy phone. And I do agree with you, like taking a look at this news announcement, I would be terrified to drop this, because I would be terrified one drop and
you'll kill the display 100%.
Yeah, it'll kill the display. And these phones, I don't know if I saw a price tag on this in particular, but I'm sure it's not cheap, and I would not want to, rest my laurels on the fact that, I'll just be super careful with it. Like, we're all like, no offense, we're all clumsy. Like, accidents do happen, and I would not want to. This is like playing with fire to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's no pricing here, but I'm sure we could. It's probably a lot of money, but that doesn't matter. It's I think for a very specific niche market, and it's fair. Speaking of folding phones as well, Tecno, which is a brand that has a sister brand under the same kind of umbrella like BBK Group has Oppo and OnePlus and Realme and Vivo. This Tecno brand has a sister brand called Infinix, but Tecno has a lot of market shares, and so does Infinix, in developing countries like Africa and India, Eastern Europe, and other places where, you're really looking for value, right? And I've got a whole bunch. I actually went through my phones to be returned yesterday, and I'm like, wow, I got a lot of Infinix and Tecno phones in here, so I need to return those. But this is a Tecno V Flip, and it's coming on September 22nd. Now, this is, I believe, still a rumor, or maybe it's been confirmed, but the point I'm making that they launched the Phantom V Fold, which was a book-style folding phone, at MWC, and it was undercutting the competition price quite extensively and delivered a pretty great product, right? So this is exciting. This is actually official. It looks like an invite to an event on the 22nd. So this is cool. They're making a flip version of, basically using that technology to make a flip phone now, which is cool. And actually, look, there's some leaked images below. So I think, considering the V Fold from Tecno was like $700 or $800 on a book style folding phone, if this is down to like $500, it's never going to sell in the US, but like for markets like Africa and India, that's super cool. I'm excited about it.
No, agreed. This is actually really exciting. And I'm going to say something that's kind of an oddball here, but I actually love that like circular design.
Yeah, it's cool, right?
It's like cute for a phone. And I realize like using the word cute on a piece of technology is really oddball, but like I'm looking at that, I'm like, oh my God, it's so adorable. I want one of these. And like, especially for that price point, like I'm thinking of, what is it, like $1,000 for a Flip 5, or I think they start at like $999 or $899. And, looking at some of the competition that was announced this year, like the Motorola Razr Plus, I think that's probably like $600, $650-ish. So for this to launch at a lower price point, that's absolutely going to be popular in the markets that it launches. I'd love to see something like that come here, but obviously I don't know if this will.
The good news is the Razr 2023 non-plus has still not been officially launched in the US, but it's available in other markets. And based on the price difference between the Plus and the non-plus Razor in those markets, we're expecting this Razor 2023 to be around $699. So we're getting there, right?
And that's the nice thing about tech. Like, it starts off like super, expensive because it's like new technology and it costs a lot to, put it from the manufacturing into, the palm of your hand. But as time goes on, it definitely drops in price. So I'll be curious to see, and is super excited to see, what comes out of models like this Techno V Flips leaked images, and see how these can improve while dropping the price point for consumers too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. All right, we've got a couple of more things I want to bring up. Interestingly, HMD Global, the company who acquired the rights to make the Nokia smartphones, not the Nokia dumb phones, because those are made by Microsoft still, believe it or not. So the Nokia phones so far have been made by HMD Global, the Android ones, and that's been a few years now. And, for a while they tried to compete in the flagship and mid-range space, but primarily now they make more like budgety, affordable phones all over the world, and they're doing pretty well. Their numbers are pretty good, but they're not very excited because of that. So now we're hearing that HMD is going to basically establish an HMD brand for their phones. So they're going to have Nokia phones and HMD Android phones too. Why? It seems really weird to me. I don't know what you're thinking about it, but
this just honestly just kind of baffles me, because right? Okay, I'm gonna be like a super big outlier here, but I swear the last time I heard of a Nokia was in the Transformers movie when they were doing which one was it? The 9S13 or something? I know I just botched that name, but it's been so long, and I always have attributed them to doing these really super sturdy dumb phones, and so having them separate out their smartphone lineup, I'm just like, what is the point of this? I almost feel like this is another situation where it's like, what was it, Honor versus Huawei? You're going to have that similar situation again, and we're going to be left once they announce their new phone lineup. We're just going to be like, but why? You literally just did a knockoff carbon copy, just retitled it with some rehashed specs, and are selling it again, I'm assuming to the same market. So to me, that doesn't make sense. My hope is that maybe they'll really push it to the limits where it'll be a competitor with some of these higher places.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe
they're going to make this a high-end brand. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my
hope. Maybe they feel they're doing well with the Nokia brand, especially in European markets on the low end, but they can't seem to break the high end because there's some stigma around that. And maybe they're like, that's what we want to do. If that's what they're doing, I get it a little more, but it's unclear right now. And it seems so weird because HMD is such a, nobody knows that brand. We're inside baseball. We know that Nokia phones are made by HMD, but people just think Nokia, right? They don't even know the difference between the dumb phones made by Microsoft and the smartphones made by HMD right now. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. But anyway, another piece of news is Thunderbolt 5. It's funny that was unveiled the same day as the iPhone gained USB Type-C, because Thunderbolt 5 uses the same connector again, and now it's 120 gigabits per second. Holy crap balls. This is Intel's new ultra high-speed Thunderbolt standard. So for you, a gamer, this means that you might be able to plug an external GPU into your laptop and go nuts, which we've been able to do for a while, but it kind of died off, that concept. I don't think that the older Thunderbolt could keep up with the current gen of graphics cards. So at these bit rates, 120 gigabits per second, wow, right?
It's going to be amazing to get my hands on this as a gamer. Currently, I think I'm running, what is it, the RTX 2000 series, but I know in my household, we also have the 3000 series, and obviously the 4000 series just dropped. So having this capability, it's setting these graphics cards up for success down the line. Presumably at some point, AMD will launch some kind of 5000 series. We all know it's coming at some point. We just don't know the timeline for it. And so I'm super happy about this personally because it means more immersive gaming for me, and especially with like the monitors becoming more powerful. I don't know if you've had a chance to check it out, but the Samsung Odyssey G9 OLED panel, like this is going to be made for this is going to be
a really nice monitor. Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. I wish I could have it, but it's just too big for my New York apartment here. But being able to, use this for that stuff is going to be great, but also for phones because more people are gaming. They want to be able to plug and play faster. They want to be able to transfer those videos and data files that you said. So I think this puts me in a happy spot, in addition to everything that was announced this week.
Yeah, no, I feel you. This is a great way to wrap things up right now. I would love to hear where folks can find you on the internet, your various social media handles, where you write, because I said Forbes, but maybe you can be more specific. Please let us know where people can find you.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I have a Twitter handle. I can actually look it up right now. As you can tell, I'm not 100% active on this stuff. I'm working on it because I do want to connect with people who are excited about tech. I think it's Bex was X. That's also, I believe, my Instagram.
I'll find it and put it in the show notes.
Yeah, find it and put it in the show. And then currently, I'm the consumer tech and electronics editor over at Forbes, where I'm spearheading all of the tech coverage. And so when we're talking about phones and announcements, alongside Miriam, I'm working on, bringing the best news and the best products to make sure that when you're purchasing something over at Forbes, we have this column called Forbes Vetted, and that's where we're actually vetting the products to make sure you're getting the best product for your specific needs. It's very exciting. I absolutely love it. And one of the things that we've been doing over there is mobile device coverage. So really excited to continue that over there.
Yeah, I'm super stoked about your content. It's always been very informative. You guys should check it out, folks. And check out the socials as well. I'll put the handle for Twitter in the show notes. And you know where to find me on the internet, folks. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL, like the comic book character. Drop the vowels. That's my handle. And it's on Instagram. It's on Twitter. It's on Threads. It's on Blue Sky. That's pretty much the main ones. Instagram is where you'll find pretty pictures of phones, of cars, which I also review, of food, of travel. And of course, there's a YouTube channel, youtube.com/mobile tech podcast. There's some unboxing and hands-on videos there. So you know how YouTube works. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell, comment, all that good stuff. The podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on all the major platforms: Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, wherever good podcasts can be found. And if your app lets you rate or review the show, please consider doing that. Also, if you want to help out, there's a Patreon where you can pay to get extra content, including a video version of the podcast that comes out a couple of days ahead of the audio version. Sometimes there's bloopers and outtakes. In this case, you will probably get a slightly longer show. And so, check it out. If you can help me, that'd be great. There's also other perks there, including access to our Discord server and stuff like that. So please consider helping me out on Patreon, patreon.com/TNKGRL. And if you want to help me in another way, there is a link to a PayPal in my podcast show notes. So click through there, buy me a $5 coffee one time, no commitment. I'd appreciate it. I also want to thank our sponsor, AT&T. FirstNet, built with AT&T, is the only network built with and for America's first responders and the extended public safety community. AT&T is at the forefront of providing industry-leading public safety solutions that modernize and transform emergency reporting and response. And I want to thank you, Rebecca, for being my guest this week. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a wonderful time talking iPhones with you. It's such an exciting announcement this week.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we'll have you back on the show at some point in the future. And folks, we'll have another show next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.